Hey guys, welcome to the channel, welcome to another video. It's that time of the week again. It is Premier League predictions time, another round of Premier League fixtures is upon us. The last round of the Premier League before the international break. So it is a big round of fixtures. Another exciting one, another intriguing round is upon us. And this is obviously the video where I look into all the games, analyse them and give my predictions on how I think each and every game will pan out. Before we get into all of that though, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things are always and very greatly appreciated. And of course I encourage you to get involved in the comments section as well. I'm sure you have a lot of interesting thoughts, comments, opinions. But most of all, of course, because this is a predictions video, I'm sure you have a lot of predictions on how you think the games will go that will make for great and interesting reading. So I would love to hear and read from you all down below in that comment section. So do get involved down there. But without further ado, let's get on with the predictions. We're starting things off with Friday night's encounter, and it is Luton yet again, but this time they are at home for the first time this season, taking on David Moyes' West Ham, who have had a fantastic start to the campaign. Luton are looking for their first win, even their first points in the Premier League, in the top flight division, since obviously coming back this season. West Ham, on the other hand, have taken 7 points from a possible 9, with their latest result being a slightly surprising 3-1 victory over Brighton last weekend. Big game, monumental game for Luton, of course, with it obviously being the first home game in the top flight division this season, welcoming David Moyes' West Ham to their home stadium. Look, it's going to be tough for Luton. They're coming up against a tough side in David Moyes' West Ham. They've started off the season very well at West Ham. The likelihood is that West Ham are going to turn up there and spoil the party. They're going to rain on Luton's parade. However, if the crowd is up for it on a Friday night, the crowd is going to be electric. I'm sure they're going to be enjoying having Premier League football back in their home stadium. I think Luton might be able to get something from this game, and that's why I'm going to say that this game will end 1-1 come the final whistle, in a slightly surprising result this weekend. Next up, we're moving on to Saturday's games, and first up we've got our lunchtime kickoff at Bramall Lane. It plays host to Sheffield United, taking on Everton. Big game for both sides. Both of these sides lost their opening 3 games of the season. Both of these sides still waiting for their first points of the season. Both of these sides will have a good opportunity to make that happen here. Sheffield United, you possibly could argue that I've been quite unlucky in recent games. I know against Nottingham Forest and even last week against Manchester City in particular, they gave a good account of themselves. And some would say they're quite unfortunate not to at least have come away with a point from both of those games. But ultimately, of course, they lost both of them. Everton, they're creating chances, but they're not sticking them away. They're not clinical enough in front of goal. That's been their story for a while. They need to try and find a clinical enough goal scorer that is going to steer them clear of relegation this season. This game could genuinely go any which way. Both sides will definitely fancy their chances of maybe, for Everton, at least getting on the score sheet and maybe taking a point. For Sheffield United, it could represent a good possibility with them being at home, with them taking positives from their previous games to maybe get a victory in this one. I'm leaning more towards a Sheffield United win, or at the very least for Everton, a draw. I'm going to say Sheffield United just about edge this one. I'm going to say Sheffield United just about edge this one and they pick up their first win of the season. I'm not confident on this one. I'm going to go with a 2-1 win in favour of the Blades. Our next game we'll see Brentford host Bournemouth. Big game for both sides. Brentford, of course, unbeaten at home unbeaten so far this season, with 1 win and 2 draws from the opening 3 games. Bournemouth, on the other hand, have only secured 1 point from their opening 3 games. As last week, of course, they lost 2-0 to Tottenham. Very intriguing game, this one. We know how Brentford like to play. We know that Brentford play some good football, and when they're at home, they can be very difficult to beat at times against the Bournemouth side, who will play with no fear. They actually play some very nice football from what we've seen in the past few weeks. under their new manager. But it's about taking their chances, and Bournemouth unfortunately haven't been able to do that in their previous 3 games to really get more points on the board. Be very difficult against this Brentford side, who we know that they can turn up and they can put you to the sword if they're in the mood to do so. We know that with Visser up front and with Mbeumo, the way they've started the season, they've started very strongly. So that could be a good beneficial factor for Brentford and the Bees so far. I'm going to go with a Bees win. I am going to say that the Bees come out of this one as 2-1 winners. Next up, Turf Moor plays host to our next game of focus as Burnley host Tottenham. Big game for both sides this one. Burnley, of course, winless so far this season. They've lost their opening 2 games of the campaign, whilst Tottenham are still unbeaten under Ange Postecoglou and going very strong, and the excitement and the optimism is growing at Spurs by the Premier League game at least. In terms of they are unbeaten so far this campaign. They have won 2 of their opening 3 games and drawn the other one, picking up 7 points from the opening 9 games. Very optimistic indeed, with their latest Premier League result being a 2-0 victory over Bournemouth. Midweek saw a bit of a reality check dealt to Spurs in terms of they lost in the Carabao Cup. They got knocked out of the Carabao Cup by Fulham on penalties. So they'll want a good response in this one to obviously continue things going forward. Burnley will obviously be tough opposition being at home. Vincent Kompany will obviously be looking to get his first points on the board as a Premier League manager in the top flight division, of course. But in saying that, you probably would expect Spurs to maybe go on and pick up the win in this one with the way that they're playing. The way that obviously they seem to have a solid midfield now, a solid defence to an extent. You probably would expect Spurs to go on and pick up the victory in this one. I am going to say that Spurs come out of this one as 3-1 winners, unfortunately, for Burnley. Next up, we have got Stamford Bridge playing host to Chelsea against Nottingham Forest, another 3 o'clock game on Saturday. Chelsea, of course, picked up their first victory of the season when they beat Luton by 3-0 last week, whilst Nottingham Forest played their part in a monumental collapse against Manchester United, in which they were 2-0 up inside the opening 5 minutes, but ultimately went on to lose the game by 3-2. Big opportunity for Chelsea to make it back-to-back wins here against a Nottingham Forest side who struggle away from home, of course. I would strongly suspect that Chelsea will win this game. They'll have their threats, of course, Will Forest, and they'll have their chances to obviously maybe give Chelsea some food for thought. But I would imagine that with the form that Raheem Sterling started the season in, with Nicholas Jackson getting his first goal last week and maybe getting a bit of a confidence booster, I would probably suspect that Chelsea and the Blues go on to win this game, make it back-to-back wins, get 3 more points on the board, and really kick on with their season from this point forward. Not a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe Taiwo Awoniyi will have something to say about that. He's in good goal-scoring form, even carrying it over from, of course, the end of last season. I'm sure he will get on the score sheet again, but I don't think it will be enough with, obviously, the defensive frailties of Forest. I can see Chelsea creating a lot of chances in this game and maybe scoring quite a few goals as well. I am going to go with a 3-1 victory in favour of the Blues. Next up, we're off to the Etihad Stadium for Manchester City against Fulham. City, of course, the only side left in the Premier League with a 100% perfect record. 3 wins out of 3 following their latest victory, which came in the dying embers of the game against Sheffield United. They left it late, but they managed to survive the scare of the Blades in that one. Fulham, on the other hand, were drawing against City's potential Premier League rivals in Arsenal. They left it late again, but they managed to rescue a point. João Palhinha making it 2-2 on the day to make sure Fulham went home with a point on that day in that London derby. Big hand, I'm sure, or potentially a big hand, I'm sure, to Manchester City in terms of an early advantage in the title race, if you are to obviously go this early on. Big game for City. Obviously at the Etihad, it's going to be so tough for Fulham to get anything out of that game. City go into this as the heavy favourites, and you would imagine that they will continue to do so. Obviously, Fulham had a very long game midweek against Spurs, which it went all the way to penalties. That could also play its factor, but I would strongly suspect that City will have no problem, whichever Fulham side turns up. Still no Pep Guardiola on the touchline this week, but I'm sure a lot's been worked on the training ground, and I'm sure he's going to still be in the minds and ears of those that are influential on this game, and of course those on the pitch as well, in terms of changing things and in terms of obviously playing. City to win this game is the favourite choice, and that is what I'm going to go with for obvious reasons. I am going to say that this game will end 2-0 to Manchester City. A huge clash awaits us for our Saturday night viewing at the Amex Stadium. It is Brighton taking on Newcastle. It is the Derby against Howe. It is the Seagulls against the Magpies. A massive game in prospect for your Saturday night viewing. I'm looking forward to this one. I really am looking forward to this one. This one should be a very exciting and intriguing game of football between two very good footballing sides on their day. And of course, both sides have the extra incentive of wanting to get back to winning ways as well. Both sides suffered defeats last time out in their games in quite surprising circumstances. Brighton, of course, lost 3-1 to West Ham despite having the lion's share of possession, but not making their chances count, and a few defensive errors allowed West Ham to capitalise and be a bit more clinical on that particular day. Whilst Newcastle, of course, couldn't put away 10-man Liverpool when they had the opportunity to do so, whilst being 1-0 up, and ultimately pay for it with a Darwin Núñez double that allowed the Reds to pick up all 3 points and a 2-1 win in favour of Jurgen Klopp's side that day. What's going to happen in this game? I am looking forward to it. I'm intrigued by this one. I think this is against two very good footballing sides. Two sides who are very much intriguing, easy on the eye at times, and we could be in for a very good battle at the Amex Stadium on Saturday night. And this is a genuine game that could go any which way. If Newcastle turn up and are in the mood and they're clinical and they're quick on the ball, when they're quick moving forward, they could easily put Brighton to the sword. But ultimately, Brighton, with the possession that they have, if they move the ball quickly forward as well, and they move the ball to hurt Newcastle's defensive line, if Sven Botman in particular is not going to be there, that is going to be a massive miss for Newcastle United going forward. And I think it could work in Brighton's favour, as harsh as that may be. But Brighton are clinical. Brighton need to be more clinical than they were last weekend. I'm sure the shooting drills have been in full force in the training ground this week. I'm leaning more towards Brighton in this one, but I think this one could be a very exciting game. I'm going to say that this game ends 3-2. I'm going to go 3-2 in favour of the Seagulls. Moving on to Sunday's games, and first up we've got Crystal Palace against Wolverhampton Wanderers at Selhurst Park. Big game for both sides this one. Palace, of course, coming to this one off the back of a draw last weekend to Brentford, whilst Wolves picked up their first win under Gary O'Neill with a 1-0 victory over Everton. Selhurst Park is always going to be a tough place to go, no matter the opposition, and for Wolves I would expect nothing less in this one. They had Jose Sarr to thank for the majority of last week. He pulled off some fantastic saves, as well as Sasa Kalajdzic, of course, grabbing the winner in that game against Everton. They're both going to have to be on top form again, I guess you'd say, to obviously get something from this one. Palace are going to be difficult. Palace created a lot of chances last week against Brentford and were unfortunate maybe not to come away with the win. And maybe the goalkeeping performance of the Brentford goalkeeper was a big reason for that. But in saying that, this one could be an interesting game. Palace playing a bit more open, playing a bit more attacking under Roy Hodgson in recent games, against the Wolverhampton Wanderers side, who are still finding their feet under their new manager, of course, after being thrown into the deep end with a managerial change right at the beginning of the season. Intriguing game. I'm going to have to lean more towards Palace, though. I'm going to have to say that Palace come out of this one with all 3 points. I think the home advantage will do them the world of good and will get them across the finish line in this one. So that's why I'm going to say that this game will end 1-0 in favour of the home side. Huge penultimate game on this list. We'll see Liverpool take on Aston Villa at Anfield. Massive game, this one, between two sides who are coming into this game off the back of back-to-back wins. Last weekend, Liverpool came back from the dead to beat Newcastle by 2-1 thanks to a substitute appearance from Darwin Núñez, who put Newcastle to the sword by scoring a brace in that game, whilst Aston Villa beat Burnley by 3-1. Massive game. Intriguing game. This is going to be a very good game in my opinion. You got Jurgen Klopp against Unai Emery, two very different managers, two different styles. You've got obviously informed players aplenty at both sides. You've got Darwin Núñez, who looked lethal last week. Hopefully he gets to start in this game, and I think he should and he will, because obviously of the way that he played last week, and I think with what he possesses in terms of his pace and his frightening speed, and you know, if his lethal finishing is to continue, he'll also have that now in his arsenal as well. In terms of obviously pushing back the Aston Villa defence, and maybe with the likes of Salah and Diaz alongside him, maybe they could stretch that back three or force back the wing backs of Aston Villa to a big extent and to a big advantage to the Reds, so they can overload that midfield. But it will be interesting to see how both teams set up. Villa, of course, are getting stronger by the game. They're getting more solidly resolute defensively, and going forward they are still strong. Ollie Watkins will always be a threat, as will the likes of John McGinn running from deep from midfield, and of course their new signing Moussa Diaby, who has started off the season incredibly well for Villa. So he will obviously be someone to look out for as far as what Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool are concerned. Now, as far as a result goes, look, I want to be confident again, and Liverpool being at home normally fills me with much confidence. However, every time I do back Liverpool to drop points, they always go on to actually win. So I'm going to actually say that Liverpool draw this game in the hope that they actually go on and win. And I'm going to say that this game will end 2-2 come the final whistle. Simply for the reason that, you know, partially that, but also partially no Van Dijk. The defensive frailties of Liverpool is still there. It would be typical of Liverpool to pull off a result last week the way they did against Newcastle, and then to drop points this week. So, again, I'm hoping that I'm again sort of jinxing it a little bit in a good way for Liverpool and myself. But at the same time, Villa are not to be underestimated by any means. So that's why I'm sticking with a 2-2 prediction. And finally, what I believe to be the biggest game of this round of fixtures, the highlight, the main event of this weekend's upcoming Premier League football. It is Arsenal clashing with Manchester United. It is Mikel Arteta against Erik ten Hag at the Emirates Stadium. Massive game indeed between these two sides. Arsenal, of course, will be looking to get back to winning ways following their 2-2 draw with Fulham last week in that London derby. You've got Manchester United, who are looking to make it back-to-back wins for them after they managed to come from behind to beat Nottingham Forest by 3-2 last week. This game is set to go off this Sunday afternoon. Massive game between these two sides, of course it is. Look, Arsenal have experimented so far this season. They can't afford to do that again. I know it's about gelling in the players that they bought in so far this transfer window, but they can't afford to experiment and try and change things around against United, because United will just take advantage and will probably go on and get something good from this game. And already losing to Fulham, or drawing to Fulham, should I say, last week, dropping points, and especially dropping points at home, Arsenal can't afford to do that again in another home game this time around, and so soon after that performance, with obviously City seemingly going from strength to strength so far in the early stages of this season. For United, they could take advantage of Arsenal, and let's face it, Arsenal's performances have been quite hit and miss so far this campaign. Obviously, a bit of a slow start for them in terms of obviously building up how good they are. But for United, their performances haven't been great either. First game of the season, they were very fortunate to come out with a win. Second game of the season against Tottenham, that second half in particular, they were very poor. They didn't take their chances. And against Forest last week, they found themselves 2 goals down in the opening 5 minutes. And whilst they did do extremely well to obviously come back and fight back and obviously get the 3 points in the end, you got to question why they were 2-0 down in the first place and how poor they were in the opening 5 minutes. And if it had been another team other than Forest, who have a poor away record and have major defensive frailties in my opinion, it might have been a different story last week. It may have been a different story. But having said that, they did great to come back. They've got to improve their performances. They've got to start taking their chances. Maybe last week was the kick up the backside that they needed. Only time will tell. But this game could be fascinating as to see how well these two teams are going to go forward in this season. The only downside, obviously, is that this is the last game before the international break. So, of course, we've got a couple of weeks wait before we find out the answer to that particular question, if that is going to be the answer. I know it's early on in the season, but these things have a way of setting patterns for the rest of the campaign. Now, as far as a result goes for this game, I'm expecting Arsenal to take hold of possession and United to hit them on the counter-attack. That's how I see the game going, in terms of obviously trying to hit the likes of Marcus Rashford and Antony in particular on the counter-attack. Whether that will be useful for United or not remains to be seen. I know that Arsenal do have defensive frailties themselves and they do make costly individual errors, but we'll have to wait and see, obviously, if we get the explosive start that these two teams suffered with last week, or whether it will be a slow burner, or whether or not it will be a frantic, constant game from start to finish. As far as a prediction goes, I think Arsenal go into it as favourites. United do seem to always find it tough at the Emirates away from home. United's away form isn't exactly great either. So I think with that being said, I am going to lean more towards Arsenal in this one. And I'm going to say that Arsenal come out of this one as 2-1 winners. And there you have it. Like I always say, these are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, but most of all, of course, predictions of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of all of the games that are coming up this weekend in another round of intriguing and exciting Premier League fixtures? What are your own thoughts, comments, opinions? But most of all, of course, what are your predictions on all of the games coming up this weekend? I would love to hear from you all down below in that comment section, so do get involved. I'm sure all of them things will make for great and interesting reading. Otherwise, hit the like button on the right if you enjoy the video, subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things are always incredibly greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Premier League predictions video, and I will see you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers guys, have a good day.